I saw.
Oh, yeah. When they get appointed.
About the amendment.
We have sitting on the. This room is the table. Kurt, you're always on the other end there.
No.
Okay, everyone, I show it's 9:30. We'll call the meeting to order. My understanding, we're now recording in the meeting, of course, we have virtual guests. Kai, if you would you begin with the roll call and confirm we have a quorum present?
Yes, sir. Tim Andrus,
Here.
Ryan Bale, John Byram, Kurt Campbell,
Here.
Andra Wision, present. Debbie Farmer,
Here.
Charlie Flatten, Stephen Metzler for Steve Graham, Terrell Graham, Vic Hildebrand, Thomas Youngman,
Here.
Scooter Mangold,
Here.
Andrew McBride,
Here.
Daniel Meyer,
Here.
Gary Middleton,
Here.
Travis Pruski,
Online and present.
Robert Puente,
Here.
Vanessa Pugh Williams,
Present.
Humberto Ramos,
Here.
Weldon Riggs,
Here.
Roland Ruiz,
Here.
Daryl Brownlow,
Here.
Darren Simmons, Mitchell Sowards,
Present online.
Jonathan Stinson,
Here.
Thomas Taggart,
Here.
Ryan Kelso,
Here.
Diane Wasenick,
Here.
Adam Yablonsky,
Here.
Dan Yoxel, Carly Rotzler,
Here. Online.
Rusty Ray, Tom Hegemeyer, Ileana Delgado, Don McGee, Michelle Foss, Charles Wiedenfeld, Jamie McCool, here. Carl Kroll. We have a quorum.
Tom Hagemeyer is here. I couldn't get the mute button quick enough. Thank you.
Got you.
And you showed that Mr. Metzler showed the meeting as an independent.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's move to agenda item 2, public comment. Have you received any public comment cards? Okay. Is there anyone present in the room that would like to offer public comments at this time? Okay. There being no one, are there any attendees virtually that would like to make public comment at this time? Okay. There being none, we'll move forward to agenda item 3. Consideration and approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of the regional planning group. Those minutes are contained within your packet sent out to the membership prior to the meeting. Is there any discussion on the matter? Is there a motion to adopt the draft minutes?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any opposition to the motion? There being none, we'll show the motion passed by consensus. We'll move to agenda item number 4, discussion appropriate action regarding filling existing vacancies and vacancies to result from future term expirations and resignations. Let me give you a brief background here. On January 9th, the executive committee met to review, meet with, and discuss nominations of individuals nominated to fill vacancies. The planning group received 2 nominations for the interest group of industrial interests. The nominated individuals were Mr. Ammerman and Mr. Schuster. The planning group received 1 nomination for the vacancy associated with the water district interest group. The nominated individual is Aaron T. Executive committee met with Mr. Ammerman and Ms. T. After considering the nominations and those discussions we had with the nominees that attended, the executive committee came to consensus on who it intended to recommend to the planning group for consideration for appointing those nominees to fill the vacancies, and the nominees were notified of our intention prior to this meeting. All nominees were invited to come to the meeting, provide an opportunity for planning group members to meet them and for them to introduce themselves. Are any of the nominees present in the room? And if so, would you like to stand up and introduce yourself? Oh, Mr. Ammerman?
Jason Ammerman, downtown.
Guaranteed evergreen underground water conservation.
Okay, based on our consideration of the nominees, the executive committee recommends that the planning group appoint Mr. Ammerman to fill the vacancy representing industrial interests and appoint Ms. T to fill the vacancy representing water district interests. Is there any discussion regarding the matter? Okay, if there's no discussion, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the recommended nominations.
Second.
Executive committee.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any opposition to the motion? There being none, we'll show the motion passed by consensus. Okay. One, two, real close. Okay, well, welcome aboard. With that, we'll move to agenda item 5, our annual consideration of election of officers to the executive committee. For those of you who are interested, the procedure under which this is undertaken is specified within the bylaws. It's an annual process. There are some limitations on who can serve, actually, a group of interests that can serve on the executive committee. If I understand it correctly, essentially no two members of the planning group from the same interest can serve on the executive committee. It's an annual term for 1 year. And so we're here today in part to consider filling these offices for the executive committee. Executive committee is comprised of chair, vice chair, I think it's secretary, and then two at-large positions on the executive committee, so it's a 5-member group. Let's see.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Unless you're still laying out the foundation, which you're talking
A few more comments.
about. Okay, well, speak. I'll.
Well, so let me provide you an update on the present members. Mr. Yablonsky and myself have notified the executive committee membership and the administrator that we do not intend to seek re-election to the positions we hold, that being vice chair for Mr. Yablonsky and chair for myself. My understanding, Mr. Middleton has expressed willingness to continue to serve on the executive committee. Mr. Graham has retired from Sarah and has turned in his resignation to the planning group. So that'd be a future vacancy we have to deal with. Of course, can't serve on the executive committee, therefore. And Mr. Ronald, I believe you're willing to continue to serve on the executive committee as well. Mr. Ronald's president fills an at-large position. That's all I have to lay out. Yes, sir.
With that foundation of what you said, 3 high-level positions, and we usually have had an opportunity to have the incumbent usually want to run for re-election, and it's usually by consensus. We've always been able to agree on that. And this is somewhat of a short notice. Not a lot of people knew, especially the 3 different positions that are being vacated for different reasons. So I would like to make a motion that we postpone the election until our next meeting. That allows everybody to understand who is running, who is not running. There's 3 vacancies, very important vacancies that we all have to look into and see who may want to serve in those capacities. That's my motion, is postpone the actual election to our next meeting.
I'll second that.
Did you have to stick around?
Yeah. I'm not sure we're gonna reach consensus, but, did I say?
I don't know if the bylaws allow for, if you have a particular need to vacate quickly, whether there's an interim,
No, it is no interim chair, but it does provide for the vice chair filling if the chair can't. That doesn't seem to be an opportunity. Let's just deal with your motion. Is there any opposition to postponing the consideration of electing officers to the next meeting of the regional planning group?
I have a question, if we're in discussion.
Sure.
And I recognize Mr. Fuentes' position. I think it's smart and good, and I'm not objecting to it, but I would ask that if there's anyone that's interested in filling these positions now, that they be given an opportunity. Not that I am, I'm just saying, put that out before we exercise your motion, that we lay this out because there may be individuals here who feel that they want to participate, just as an alternative in this discussion.
well, does that mean if somebody is interested, then we would be voting on them?
We give them that opportunity, or we give, just as part of the discussion.
Yeah, unfortunately, regarding that, I think I have a motion, current motion on the floor.
Right.
That needs to be addressed, so if it's defeated, then we'll.
Well, we're in discussion,
Yeah, well,
and I'm bringing this up as a discussion point, if that's consideration. So I'm not competing with your
I
motion.
understand. I think just, if somebody is interested, obviously they can say so now and start talking to everybody about their interest in it. But the actual physical submitting of ballots and everything, I think we would want to wait until at least our next meeting, which I think is in May.
Okay, I'm cool with that. I just wanted to make sure we weren't undercutting anybody
No,
right now through this
I
process.
hope we're not. I think there were some people that were interested and some people, and then they showed not as much interest as what we thought. But I think this gives everybody a more level playing field to advocate for themselves.
Sure.
Okay, before we proceed to the motion, are there any members that want to identify them as potential candidates for filling vacancies on the executive committee? That is the question. Does anyone want to identify themselves?
Don't raise your hand all the way down.
Yeah, right. Make a line. Okay. We provide that opportunity. We'll now deal with the motion to table the consideration of decision on this matter to the next meeting.
Just 1 second. Could we ask if our chair and vice chair are willing to serve until then?
Well, yes, I'll serve until then. I don't know about Mr. Valinsky. I think, but
Yeah, I can. I mean, I don't, not that it would make much of a difference, but I'm certainly happy to.
sure.
Well, we don't want to remain leaderless in any emergency.
Mr. Chair, from the online attendees, I was asked if the planning board members could speak a little louder so they could hear more clearly. But they can hear you, Mr. Chair, just fine.
Okay, very good.
Could you tell us where the speaker is that picks up our voices?
At the, behind you, right there. Yes, ma'am.
It's actually very easy to hear you, Diane, and to hear Tim, but when Mr. Puente's speaking, it's hard to hear him. And then occasionally, like, I don't know if there's somebody sitting near him that's also harder to hear. So maybe they're farther away from the mic.
Hard to understand.
That's why I'm here today, is I've been to a few Zoom meetings and I can't hear diddly. So I would recommend that you point your face towards this direction when you speak instead of at him.
Support that. Okay, so we're going to deal with the motion we have on the floor here. Is there any opposition to postponing this consideration to the next meeting? If you oppose it, speak now. You all can pay out.
We appreciate your service.
You're welcome. So with that, we'll show that motion passed by consensus. With that, we'll move to agenda item 6, staff reports and communications by Texas Water Development Board. Ms. Foss, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. What a way to spend Valentine's Day in public service, helping our fellow Texans get the water that they need to thrive and flourish. Everybody's been a little busy since our last meeting. Few upcoming things, of course, the technical memorandum is due in just a few weeks. The board will have approximately 30 days to review the tech memorandum and identify if there's additional information needed, if we're going to accept the technical memorandum as submitted, or if it's going to be rejected. That's rarely the case. A lot of things going on surrounding Proposition 6 and the Texas Water Fund. The board is seeking public input via 3 online surveys that are hyperlinked on our website. We highly encourage everyone to participate. It's not just for political subdivisions or organizations. The public is certainly invited to state their opinions on how the money should be used, priorities, public awareness for water is one of the surveys. We're accepting comments through April. Comments can be accepted online. There's a write-in email address if you prefer to submit that way. They're taking comments during the March 8th board meeting. And there's going to be a special stakeholder meeting in Austin on March the 20th. And we have information regarding that on our website as well. Water use survey period is open until March 1st. The boundary service editor is open until July 1st. We know that a number of y'all are acquiring or divesting part of your service areas, so we want to keep that information as up to date as possible. The agricultural water conservation grant period, it application period is open until April the 3rd. And we just had one informational webinar last week. We have 2 more on March 6th and March 27th that has all the information you need regarding applying. And those are grants, that's not loans. There we go. The chair's call was held last month. We went over some regulatory updates that are proposed. The first regulatory update is to Chapter 357 for water planning rules. This was a requirement added in as a result of House Bill 1565 that adds in requirements for regional water plans, specifically including information on implementation of large projects. And by large projects, we're referring to reservoirs, interstate or interbasin transfers of water, innovative technology, desal, and other large projects. And the regional water plans would need to indicate expenditures of sponsor monies, permit application status, and construction status if appropriate. These proposed modifications to 357 were reviewed by the board during the board meeting last week on the 8th and approved for publication in the Texas Register. We anticipate that they will be published on Friday. And then the other rule change that has been proposed is for Chapter 359 for Texas Water Banking and the Texas Water Trust. That they have interest to this group is that the rule proposal was including changes to allow for individuals to donate groundwater to the Texas Water Trust. Right now, the rule has provisions for donations of surface water to the trust, but it's silent on groundwater. That rule provision has been tabled for further discussion because there is not a similar alignment in the groundwater district rules that would give them the oversight rule like the SCTRWPG does for the surface water. So they're still having some discussions there. The chairs reviewed a regional water plan amendment guidance and infeasible amendment timelines. That does not apply to this group. They discussed the notice to proceed process. They discussed the socioeconomic impact analysis process and timeline for the regional water plans in previous planning cycles. Planning groups had to request for the board to prepare those socioeconomic analyses before the board would start on those activities. Instead, for this cycle, we're just going to go ahead and take care of that for you. So those are already in process.
Get the microphone closer to you, please.
Okay. There we go. Is that better?
Oh, yes.
All right. The Interregional Planning Council had their last meeting last week. Thank you, Chairman Andrews, for your service on the Interregional Planning Council. They did their final review and adopted the Interregional Planning Council report that addressed comments and suggestions for improvement for the planning process that were made during the previous planning cycle. And then we've been working behind the scenes on some materials that will help regional water planning groups through the rest of this planning process, including county-specific water supply planning information and resource documents, specifically addressing rural entities and at-risk suppliers. Those at-risk suppliers are less than 7,500 population, sole source suppliers, and suppliers that have found themselves on the TCEQ 180-day list. We've been working on some additional conservation resources for y'all. We have also been working with the Drought Preparedness Council on drought and drought preparedness resources. Some of those were distributed to chairs and technical consultants yesterday. We're updating drought management costing information, and we're updating the uniform costing model. So you'll have 2022 and 2023 dollars to work with instead of 2018 dollars for your planning. And as a lot of y'all know, costs have gone up significantly for projects. And that's all I have. One other item of note, SWIFT applications, the abbreviated SWIFT applications were submitted to the board February 1st, and this planning group might be of interest that of the 20 abbreviated applications that were submitted for consideration, 5 were from Region L. One is for GBRA, for the ARWA GBRA Project Phase 1. Also, ARWA submitted an application for their portion of the same project. SAWS submitted 2 applications, one for the expanded local Carrizo project and one for the ASR treatment plant expansion. And Canyon Regional Water Authority submitted an application for the CRWA Hayes Caldwell water treatment plant expansion project.
Thank you. Report?
Yes.
Diane?
I follow TWDB on social media just because I might pick up some info.
Mhm.
And I was extremely surprised, to say the least, when I saw a message this past couple of weeks about a study that TWDB is doing about the connection between groundwater and surface water. And I wondered if you knew what prompted that study, or did it bubble up from TWDB, or did the legislature direct you to do this? It's just so surprising to me that I wondered if I could find out today. If not, I'll call TWDB.
I can certainly ask John Dubnick to verify it, but I'm quite certain that that was one of the items in our legislative rider.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions or comments regarding the report? Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all.
I'll move to agenda item 7, staff reports and communications related to regional water planning by the chair, liaisons, groundwater management area representatives, and members of the planning group. As chair, I have nothing additional to report. Frankly, TWDB covers most of that. Those of you who are interested in the chair. Is there any other reports for discussion to be offered under agenda item 7 at this time? Anything online? Very good. We'll move to agenda item 8. Presentation by a technical consultant regarding schedule and progress updates. Dallas?
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Should I move closer? Okay. Good morning. I'm Lauren Gonzalez with Black and Beach. We have several members of our technical consultant team here today. Jamie Berg with Black and Beach, Laura Ron with Laura Ron PR, Michael Koenig with Black and Beach, and then we have a few members online, including Richard Hoffpower, who does our water availability modeling, and Christine Westerman with SWCA. Starting off with the schedule. So this is the 5-year Region L plan development schedule. As you can see here, we're in the first quarter of 2024, shown here by the yellow highlight. There are lots of overlapping tasks that we have going on. I think the primary ones that we're working on right now are Task 3, water availability and supply analysis, and Task 4, the technical memorandum, which is due, as Michelle mentioned, on March 4th of this year. And then we have several other tasks that will be starting up in this quarter and or next quarter. Zooming into the anticipated schedule for 2024, again, we have several ongoing simultaneous tasks, including the Task 1, planning area description, Task 3, the water availability and supplies, Task 4, the identification of water needs, and then, as I mentioned, the tech memo was due March 4th. That's what that red flag is in the middle there, showing the deadline. We're going to be moving into the water management strategy evaluations, which is Task 5B. And as Michelle mentioned, we should be getting a few data resources from the Texas Water Development Board this quarter and next quarter probably. Shown here by the screen flag, mainly the unified costing model that will help us evaluate the water management strategies on cost basis. And then we are also starting this quarter Task 8, meeting segments and policy recommendations, which I'll discuss in later slides, later agenda items. We have 2 tasks that will be starting up next quarter. Task 5C for water conservation recommendations, and Task 7, the drought response information and recommendations. So the main topics for us today include the scope of work for Task 5B approval, so that's the water management strategies scope of work, and then presenting and hopefully approving the technical memorandum, which is Task 4C. At the May Regional Water Planning Group meeting, I anticipate we'll be discussing water management strategy updates and also presenting certain draft plan chapters. Here's a summary of the completed efforts to date. So the Texas Water Development Board approved the population water demand projections on November 9th. We had presented that information and the feedback that we provided to the board at the November 2nd RWPG meeting. The Texas Water Development Board completed their review of our hydrologic variance request, and they approved that on January 8th. And then we have completed development of the draft technical memorandum that's included in your agenda packet and handouts here as handout A. So we will, this is still in draft form, and we plan to finalize it before submittal to the Texas Water Development Board next month. And we will present more information in detail in a subsequent agenda item today. The next item is the completion of the development of the scope of work for potential water management strategy evaluations. That is also included as a handout in your agenda packet. It's handout B. It is a large 11 by 17 table that lists the potentially feasible water management strategies, and we'll talk about that in more detail in the subsequent agenda item today. Update on new or ongoing efforts. We're going to continue the water supplies and water management strategy outreach to water user groups. Last year, we sent out a survey to water user groups and wholesale water providers, soliciting feedback on existing supplies and planned water management strategies. We have also met with certain WUGs and wholesale water providers to obtain feedback on supplies, sales, transfers, that sort of information. And all the information we've compiled and received up to January 23rd will be incorporated into the technical memorandum. And we will continue engaging WUGs to obtain feedback beyond the technical memorandum, because the technical memorandum is really just supposed to be a snapshot of data as of March 2024, and it's subject to change because it's just meant to be a draft. We're also continuing inter-regional coordination efforts, having regular calls with Region K consultant team, and also connecting with Regions G, N, and P as needed, and also Region M. And then a new effort that's starting is beginning to draft Chapter 8, which is the recommendations regarding unique stream segments and/or reservoir sites and legislative and regional policy issues. And we will discuss that in a later agenda item today. Another new item we'll be beginning soon is the drought contingency plan outreach and evaluations. So there are certain entities that must develop DCPs and submit them to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. That deadline is May 1st of this year. They're updated every 5 years. And so they're supposed to be submitted to the TCEQ and also to regional water planning groups. Usually they go to the San Antonio River Authority. And so as a planning group, we're responsible for gathering and requesting DCPs and then reviewing them and describing drought management measures. And so the next steps are for San Antonio River Authority to provide those DCPs that they've received to us, and then we will then follow up and send out emails to those entities that are required to develop them but haven't provided them to the planning group yet. And then we're planning at future meetings, we'll provide you updates on which DCPs we've received. And in some instances, we may ask you all to reach out to your network to encourage those entities to send in their DCPs to us so that we can meet the requirements of the board with regards to Chapter 7.
Lauren, I have a question. It's Mr. Ramos. Hopefully y'all can hear me. Is there any way you can communicate that information now? You know, just send them, here's a list of these DCPs that are required from entities?
We have a list from the board of here are the entities that are required to develop them. I don't have any DCPs that have been updated yet, and because that deadline is May 1st, I anticipate we will get sort of a slew of DCPs between now and the May meeting. So I could certainly email to Kai and she can send it to the group that list of
I'm
required.
just trying to be more proactive, you know, just, they're required, let's get them out there and see who's
Yeah.
who's come play.
I'll get you that list and we can email that out to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other questions on the ongoing updates? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, you said that you have regular calls with Region K, and as their liaison, I wonder, are there any special things going on with Region K that I should be listening for at the meetings?
Nothing at this time. I think mainly what we're coordinating on are the shared water user groups that we have between Region K and us, trying to make sure that we're getting data accurately captured and put into DB27s. There's a lot of cooperation there because we don't have access to some of the database entries, and so we have to request them to add things and vice versa. I can't think of anything that you might need to be aware of at this time.
Well, that was my thought, was the stages we're in right now are not where I would learn about any conflicts or water programs that we would need to know about. So I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Are there any other questions about the schedule? Yes, sir.
Is the requirement for the entities that are required to submit, is there is it all WUBs, or, I mean, what WUBs are involved in that? Do you have a definition of that yet from the board?
Is it entities that are greater than 3,000 connections and those that are submitting funding requests to the board? I think they're required to develop DCPs. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, it's only of those requesting some type of funding.
And those that have 3,000 connections or more, and wholesale water providers.
3,000 connections. Okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a similar question if there's ways to capture, particularly with respect to municipal use in some of the more rural parts of our planning area where we know that water supplies are declining and we're seeing increased growth. But those utilities may not never ever apply for funding through SWIFT and are not really included in the demands. So I'm just, is that like a larger policy issue that we can't really address in this planning forum, or is that something that we could actually try to better understand?
Sure, so the requirement to develop a DCP is driven by the rules. So again, it's not just those that are applying for funding, it's also those with connections of 3,000 connections or more. And so some of these smaller entities that are more rural, they're not required to develop a DCP per se, but that doesn't preclude them from developing one on their own and having ordinances that would encourage conservation or otherwise have water restrictions that would enable conservation during drought. Did that answer your question?
Well, I guess I'm just confused about how we capture their water needs in our planning efforts.
Sure. So do you mean needs in the sense of the capital and proper noun needs? Because the Texas Water Development Board helps us to develop, okay, we have supplies, subtract the demands, and if that's a negative number, then we have quote unquote needs with a capital N. So in that sense, yes, we capture water needs for water user groups in the region. Now, when it comes to conservation, drought conservation, or drought contingency planning, we develop water management strategies later this year for advanced water conservation for entities with needs, capital N, and then also a drought contingency water management strategy for entities that have needs with a capital N. And then also those entities can request entity-specific conservation or drought management goals if they so choose. Did that answer your question?
She's not.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions on the schedule and updates? If not, I could move on to agenda item 9 regarding the presentation of the tech memo.
So with this item, you're going to make the presentation, just so the membership's aware. Following the presentation discussion, there'll be an opportunity to receive from the court public comment regarding the tech memo as well. So please proceed with your presentation.
So the technical memorandum is meant to be a mid-cycle deliverable for the 2026 regional water plan. It's meant to be a draft of a snapshot of the data as of this middle portion of the cycle. The data remains in draft form. It can be changed before the IPP. It can be changed between the IPP and the submittal of the adopted plan. The tech memo is due March 4th. And we have the draft tech memo in your packets right now as handout A. This slide shows a table that includes the required contents, the required elements shown here in the middle. And then we've gone ahead and included a couple of columns to help understand how we've satisfied these requirements. So on the far left column, we have the tech memo section in which each of these elements are addressed. And then in the far right columns, we've identified whether or not we've already presented this information to you all and when the date in which it was presented. And I will go through each of these items in subsequent slides. So with regards to the population water demand projections, that's in handout A, section 3.0. As I mentioned earlier, the Texas Water Development Board approved the population and water demand projections on November 9th. And those projections are included as a report, a DB27 report, in the tech memo as Appendix A. DB27 is the database used by the planning group for us to input all data associated with supplies, water management strategies, and so forth, so we can do an accurate accounting of water demands and so forth within the region. The next section is source water availability. That's described in section 4.0 of the technical memorandum. It is broken out by sections. The first is the surface water availability section, and it describes how we estimated surface water availabilities. So we used the unmodified TCEQ Guadalupe San Antonio River Basin WAM Run 3. That's the unmodified version of that WAM. And we also used the alternative water availability model, the quote-unquote Region L WAM, to determine firm yields of reservoirs within Region L. We also used the unmodified TCEQ WAMs to determine firm yields for other river basins like the Guadalupe, Nueces, and the San Antonio River basins. For groundwater availability, there are three major categories of availabilities that are incorporated into DB27. The first is MAG volumes that are directly from the MAG reports that the GMA's the Texas Water Development Board develops based on GMA information. Second is the Texas Water Development Board has modeled non-MAG volumes for certain groundwater sources that are DFC compatible, and that information is provided to us by the Texas Water Development Board. And so whenever I'm talking about information from the board, I'm talking about, in terms of groundwater, I'm talking about the MAG data, and I'm talking about the TWDP non-MAG data. So the third category is the RWPG estimated groundwater availabilities, and that's from us. And that is subject to revision, but the purpose of it being included in the tech memo is for us to describe those RWPG estimated groundwater availabilities, and then describe the methodology used to estimate those. And so we used Edwards Aquifer Authority information to estimate availabilities within their jurisdiction, and that's based on current permits and the forbearance programs. We also used historic annual production volumes, pumpage data from the Texas Water Development Board, and then used Texas Water Development Board published data reports to estimate the groundwater availabilities. And I will get into more information about the groundwater availability, not this next slide, but the slide after. So for surface water availability, this is a table that shows the reservoirs that we used the regional WAM for, and the middle columns show what the firm yield is using the unmodified WAM Run 3 versus the firm yield using the regional WAM. All of these data incorporate sedimentation into them. And as you can see, if we used the unmodified firm yield, the unmodified WAM Run 3, the firm yield is much lower than using the regional WAM. It's also worth noting that there are few, for 3 reservoirs shown here with this footnote of C, the regional WAM estimates the firm yields to be greater than the authorized diversion amounts in their water rights permits. So we take the lesser of the two in terms of what we put into DB27, what we'll incorporate into the regional water planning, or regional water plan. So for example, the Victor Bronick Lake is shown here to have 12,916 acre-feet per year of firm yield, when their actual authorized diversion amount is 12,000 acre-feet per year. So the 12,000 is what we'll put into DB27 and into the regional water plan, not the 12,916. Are there any questions on the surface water availability before I move on to the groundwater?
Yes, I have a question. The most recent Sunset Report tasked TCQ with updating their WAM models. Has Region L been in any conversations with them about updating those or
Yeah.
involved in that?
Yeah, great question. So the TCQ did update WAM models for, as far as I know, all of the river basins in October. So the WAM model that we used here was the updated one as of October 2023.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to groundwater availabilities. So this slide is a truncated version of the table that's included in Appendix D of the technical memorandum. This summarizes groundwater availabilities in terms of information from the Texas Water Development Board, which is basically MAG data or the non-MAG data that's DFC compatible, versus the RWPG estimated groundwater availabilities, both in the 2080 decade. And this is broken out into two different slides. So any revisions from what was provided to us by the board are shown in red. So the first three lines are for the Creeks and Wilcox in Karnes County. The original information provided to us by the Texas Water Development Board, which is from the MAG, was 0 for Karnes Guadalupe Basin and Karnes Nueces Basin. And then for Karnes San Antonio, it was 1,043 acre feet per year. We looked at historic groundwater pumpage data and determined that the RWPG could estimate the groundwater availabilities to be slightly higher. And this is based off of historic groundwater pumpage data. So the pumps exist, the wells exist, and demands in these areas exist. So if we did not incorporate this information, we would be left with unmet needs in the area, and we may still encounter unmet needs for this area later on in the plan. In terms of the Edwards BSC aquifer, for the most part, these rows are associated with determining the reliable supply of permitted water user groups. So we looked at all of the permits from EAA, did some calculations to determine what the reliable supply would be and repeated the draft record, taking into account the HCP forbearance programs, stage 5 critical drought, all of that information, and then determined what the split would be between the various counties and basins and use types. And so the information that was provided by the board, for example, row 4 for Atascosa Nueces Basin, was 360 acre feet. And based on our evaluation of those permits, there have been new permits that were issued to Atascosa County, Nueces, and San Antonio Basin. So instead of 360, we're now estimating it to be 522 acre feet per year. The overall permitted volumes for all of the EAA area did not change significantly. So we're seeing a lot of increases here in these particular counties, but they decreased in other areas. So there's not like an overall increased permitted volume or anything like that. And so that methodology that we used was applied for rows 4 through 9, and then also row 11, and a few more on the next slide. So row 10 is the Frio County Edwards BSC aquifer. That is not regulated by EAA. There are no permits, obviously, issued by EAA for the Frio. And so this 23,213 acre feet that was provided by the board was carried forward from the previous plan. And that information is based off of a published report by the Texas Water Development Board that estimated the MAG for the Frio in Nueces Basin to be 23,213 acre feet per year. And then on the second of two slides here is the remaining RWPG estimated groundwater availabilities, again, for the Edwards Aquifer BFC. Use those permitted values and reliable to develop the reliable supply for rows 12 through 15. And then for the Leona Gravel Aquifer, there are no MAG volumes associated with the Leona Gravel Aquifer in Medina County. However, there was a Texas Water Development Board, 2 reports published by the board in specifically for the Leona Gravel in Medina County, and those reports were dated 2012. And so that's how we reached those numbers, and again, they were carried forward from the previous cycle. Yes, sir.
Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Williams has a question.
Yes, Ms. Williams?
Yes, sorry. So I am wondering, I'm confused. I'm looking at line 12 for the Edwards Balcones Fault Zone in Hayes County, where the Water Development Board availability is 942 acre feet, and you're saying that y'all have determined that that's actually 8,283 acre feet. Can you explain to me how you came up with that number again?
Sure. There were a couple of inconsistencies with Hayes County between last cycle and this cycle. Part of that is, I believe, in the past cycle, what was used was only the MAG for Hayes County and Edwards Aquifer. So a portion of Hayes County is regulated by EAA. And then another portion is regulated by the GMA and GCBs. And so what we did to estimate the Hayes County Edwards BFC aquifer was make sure that we're incorporating the availabilities based on the EAA permits plus the MAG directly from the GMA, or directly from the Texas Water Development Board based on the GMA data. And so we added those together to get this 8,283. So I think that's the biggest difference here. I think the 942 is the MAG. Another thing about Hayes County is that a portion of it is considered fresh, and then another portion is considered fresh and brackish. And so we made sure that we were incorporating that in specific ways into TB27. And
okay, and this is the first time I've sat on the regional water planning group, so I'm still learning. But I have worked in the groundwater space for a long time, and honestly, this is the first time I ever was aware that the regional water planning groups came up with their own groundwater availability estimates. I just always thought that with respect to groundwater that the MAG was used. Am I like misunderstanding like a key component here, or can you just maybe provide a little bit of background on where this authority for the regional water planning group to do this comes from and why?
Sure. So the rules by the Texas Water Development Board and the guidance allows RWPGs to estimate their own groundwater availabilities in circumstances where you have a preponderance of information and evidence to support that. And so if the planning group chooses to not incorporate that for any particular aquifer, county, or basin, we can certainly modify this accordingly. In terms of the Edwards BFC aquifer, it is very unique compared to any other region because EAA is given that authority to issue the permits as opposed to it being a MAG-led effort, GMA-led effort, if you will. So there is no MAG.
And also in the the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District in Hayes County.
Right.
And part of Travis.
Right, and we incorporated the MAG information that was generated, as a result of the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District information. So For Hays County, it is what you're seeing here is a sum of the MAG plus the EAA permitted reliable supply. And so it's not, in these instances, we are not changing the MAG or overriding the GMAs or GCDs in any case. For the Edwards VSC aquifer, there is no MAG, therefore we rely on EAA's permits and then do a calculation of the reliable supply of those permits, and that gives us the availabilities.
Okay, so are you saying that the Regional Water Planning Group undertakes our own assessment when we don't have a MAG?
Yes.
Okay, so in another part of the planning group where there is a MAG, then we just proceed with that volume.
That's
as
right.
Informing. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry if you said that at the beginning and I missed it, but.
No, it's okay. I appreciate the questions. Yes, that's correct for the preponderance of counties and aquifers, except for what we're showing you here. So for those Edwards VSC, where it says permitted amount, is that methodology I mentioned, EAA permits reliable supply. Where it shows these published reports / data, or in the case of the Carrizo Wilcox, the published report / data, that's based on the historic pumpage data. And again, this is subject to RWPG input. If you do not want to include these RWPG estimated groundwater availability, specifically for the Carrizo and Karnes County, we can strike that. It's just that we know that these wells exist. We know they're pumping. We have the data from the water use surveys that the board develops. And it's just a matter of, we know that there are wells, we know that there are demands, and we can, we have evidence to show that there is availability to supply that.
Can I ask, regarding Vanessa's question, you're essentially just adding the MAG and what EAA has permitted together because they are from different parts of the county. They're not in the same spot.
They don't
correct?
overlap in geographical.
Not overlapping geographically. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could, I think, Dan, to get to your point, the EAA's jurisdictional footprint doesn't cover the entirety of Hays County.
Yeah, I know that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions on this slide? So the next section of the tech memo is section 3.0, identified water needs. This is sort of tangentially addressed just through the needs are generated as part of the DD27 report, and they're included in Appendix A of the tech memo. And then once we identify water user groups with needs, and they are then included in Appendix F to identify the potentially feasible water management strategies that can be implemented by each of those WUGs with needs. I should also note Appendix A of the technical memorandum, which has all of those DD27 reports. This is very much in draft form. If you see any errors, and you've already provided us information, it's very likely we have that information and are working through our way through DD27 to update that info. So I would anticipate lots of changes to Appendix A, and I also anticipate changes to Appendix F as we identify which ones actually have needs and which ones don't. So in terms of estimating existing water supplies, the methodology was to use a variety of data sources to estimate each individual water user group's supplies. So we used the 2021 Region L water plan as a basis, and then we sent out surveys to water user groups and wholesale water providers. In some instances, we had one-on-one meetings with certain WUGs and wholesale water providers to understand all of their sales and transfers, all of their water sources, and then we also helped others that may have needed assistance filling out the survey. So we had lots of conversations with lots of different WUGs. And then we also relied on the historic groundwater pumpage data provided by the Texas Water Development Board. Also, we have permit information from all GCBs and also EAA. And then also relied on the TCQ Drinking Water Watch data. So all that information has been and is still being compiled, and then we will update DB27, and it will be incorporated as reports included in Appendix A. The next section is section 5.0 regarding infeasible water management strategies from the 2021 plan. So as you all may recall, we presented this information to you all at the previous meeting on November 2nd. In general, the requirement was for us to evaluate certain water management strategies from the 2021 plan and identify whether or not any were considered to be infeasible. And we determined that by reaching out to project sponsors to figure out what the status of these various projects were. In the end, we established feasibility for all of the water management strategies, which was great, because if we didn't, we had identified any strategies as being, quote, infeasible, then we would have had to amend the 2021 plan to either shift the decade of implementation for those strategies or take them out or something like that. So we have a statement in section 5 of the tech memo that says there were no identified infeasible strategies, therefore no amendment is necessary. The next section is section 6.0, which is the documented process for identifying potentially feasible water management strategies. This was presented to you all at the November 2nd meeting, and it is described in Appendix E of the technical memorandum. The next section is section 7.0, which is potentially feasible water management strategies. That is looking at the list of water user groups with needs, capital N, and then identifying categories of strategies that would be potentially feasible for each of those water user groups. And those strategies include conservation, drought management, rainwater harvesting, things like that. And we determined whether or not they were potentially feasible or not potentially feasible based off of information and feedback that we found from amongst this cycle and also information from the previous plan. And then section 8.0 introduces or summarizes the interregional coordination efforts to date, which includes the regular meetings or conversations with consultants in adjacent regions, regular reports from interregional liaisons, and of course, Chair Andrus's engagement and membership in the Interregional Planning Council and in the Regional Water Planning Chairs meetings. And so that summarizes the various sections of the tech memo. And so the next steps are for the planning group to receive and consider public comment, and then hopefully you all will approve the technical memorandum to be submitted. And then we will then finalize and submit the tech memo by the March 4th, 2024 deadline. And does anybody have any questions about the tech memo?
Lauren, I've got a question. This is Mr. Ramos. With regards to what we've done in the past, I know we have this statistical number with regards to number of WUGs that reached out to, number of WUGs that responded, amount of water that needs to the region. Do you have any idea what that is?
The number of WUGs that responded.
Number of WUGs were calculated from this information, but that was reflection within the region.
Okay.
I think last time was like 75 or 80% of the region.
Right.
Do you know what that is? With regards to respondents?
I would, so based on the statistics that we did last time, and we got a similar, first off, we got responses from 50 water user groups and wholesale water providers, which I think is pretty good. It's much better than we've gotten in the past. It can still be better, and we'll work on that, but I think it's pretty good. And based on the statistics we did last time, I did not calculate them this time, right? But based on what we did last time, we got similar responses from similar number and similar number of entities, so it would probably be in the 80, like upper 80% in terms of population served. So we got like 80% of the population of Regional essentially responded to the survey.
If you need more time to figure it out, please figure it out.
Okay. We can do that.
Any other discussion about the planning group members? If not, this time we'll take public comment regarding the technical memorandum. Is there anyone present or online that would like to offer public comment at this time? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
David Caldwell, General Manager from Ada County, GCD. Leona gravel numbers, we probably need to talk about those because those are sort of higher than what's currently available.
I couldn't hear that. Is there anybody that could repeat it?
The water levels available for year to year from Medina County GCD from Leona gravel are higher on the list than the reality warrants at this point. So I'd like to give a consultant at a later date.
Any other public comment?
Is it a public comment, or if we have questions, specific questions, do we go back to that separately, or are we gonna be asked to approve this right now?
Why don't we accept public comment? The next item is the consideration of approval. And we can have a discussion at that time with the membership. That's agreeable.
That's absolutely.
Could you tell me who was the Leona gravel commenter?
David Caldwell, the General Manager for Medina County Groundwater Conservation District.
I should also note, when this isn't really the public comments section, but when we developed those SCTRWPG estimated groundwater estimates, we did send all of the information to GMAs to give them the opportunity for feedback. We haven't received any today. We had questions, but none of them had concerns when we requested feedback.
Lauren, when did you send those to the GMAs?
In mid-January.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that you may not have received feedback because of the meeting schedules. Like I know, I mean, I don't know when all of the GMA meetings are, but they don't meet that frequently. So it could be that they aren't able to actually respond until their next meeting.
Okay, and we have time. So if we put this information into the tech memo, there's still an opportunity for us to revise it. So if you want this to be a topic of discussion at the May meeting, we can certainly revisit it and have discussion about any feedback we've received and then develop recommendations on how to move forward.
I would appreciate that, yes.
And is it the individual GMAs that you're contacting or the individual groundwater districts?
So we sent the information to individual GMAs, and in some instances, I think 2 instances, they went ahead and forwarded it to all the GCBs within their region.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional public comment? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is consideration and approval regarding the 2026 Regional Water Planning Technical Memorandum. At this time, we'll open it to the floor for discussion. Brown.
So was I to hear you correct that it is feasible that we can delay this approval of this technical memorandum until May?
No, we cannot delay the approval of the technical memorandum, but the information included in the technical memorandum is still draft. It can still be subject to change, and so we can revisit this topic of discussion in May. But the tech memo needs to be approved today so that we can submit it March 4th.
And then in May, if between now and then, if there's adjustments that need to be made, or if there's conflict or whatever, we can adjust it at that time?
Yes, sir.
For pending, yeah, okay.
Discussion, sure.
Can't it be adjusted or updated or whatever you want to call it before, anytime before the final submittal to the Water Development Board on the regional plan?
Yes, sir. Technically, yes. Of course, we would prefer it to be sooner rather than later because the supplies rely on the availabilities and the needs rely on the supplies, and then the water management strategies rely on the needs. So if we keep changing things, it makes the puzzle harder to figure out.
Thank you.
So, may I follow up? It's because there are a couple things in here that are rather significant, and I've got some questions on.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know whether to reserve that discussion after the meeting with technical staff or present it now, or
Okay.
lay out those questions now.
Are they like typographical
No,
or just questions?
They're numbers.
Okay.
I mean, for example, I was intrigued with the Edwards aquifer numbers for Frio County and the 23,213 feet of availability of Edwards aquifer water in Frio County, which is outside the EAA. But you're suggesting this suggests that source is available. Consequently, it raises some questions in my mind about transferability into Medina County and some other things. And that it affects the EAA, obviously, and the water availability within that. So I was surprised to see that and apologize if everyone else has seen it and dismissed it or accepted it. But it's a question I have that it's a rather substantial volume of water.
Right.
That's within the Evergreen groundwater district. So that water will be permitted through the Evergreen, but it affects that issue. And maybe it's an issue I can talk to Roland about offline.
Sure. I can't really speak to the transference of water from Frio to Medina, because what we're looking at is the source of that supply.
And availability.
And its availability.
Exactly.
Right.
And so there's some details there that are intriguing.
Right. So that 23,000 acre feet, give or take, is based on a Texas Water Development Board issued report from 2012. And I'm happy to provide that to you. It's rather detailed and
Right, but we're saying as a regional planning group that is an available supply within our availability numbers.
Yes, sir.
But we don't have it, I don't think we have a tie to it in any way or how it's utilized.
Oh, in terms of if there are wells that are tapping into that now?
That's how it's being utilized now. Is that just a raw availability number? Could that represent a source of water? If so, it is intriguing.
Okay, so in terms of availability, this would just be an amount of water that is available to water user groups to drill wells and obtain that water. It's subject to permits and so forth.
I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm
Am I
going
not
outside
answering
the
the question?
boundaries. No.
Okay.
The other question I had is the separation in the availability. For example, the Carrizo Wilcox aquifer in Wilson County, where we show a significant availability. I'm just curious at the split between fresh water and brackish water, because it appears that it's just summed together in page, in the report.
In the DB27 report?
Exactly.
Okay.
And these are not inconsequential numbers. I mean, we go from 20,000 to 110,000 over the period. So obviously we're adding brackish water. And I was just curious about how that separation of brackish water was entered into the availability numbers here without going through, how the brackish availability was determined.
Okay. I'll have to get back to you on that.
That's why I suggested it may be a little more technical.
Okay. So those numbers that are in that DB27 report for the Carrizo in Wilson County, those are from the Texas Water Development Board. They're MAG data. Those are MAG volumes. We haven't modified or suggesting to modify those. And so it is possible that they summed brackish and fresh. In some instances, they will separate it, and we will see separate line items in DB27 for brackish and fresh. It really just depends on how the MAG report presents that information.
Okay, so that's the type of information I want to dig into a little more, but I certainly don't want to do anything to upset the schedule here. But those are the kind of issues that might arise over the course of the next couple of months. And if we have an opportunity to gauge that before May and make adjustments as appropriate, then that's great. I certainly have no problem with it. I wanted to give a flavor for the questions that I had.
Mr. Brownlow, is your concern associated with the Regional Water Planning Group revised availability numbers for groundwater?
Yeah.
Not the MAG?
Not
TWDB?
Not the MAG.
Okay.
But they may be interlinked.
Oh, I understand that.
Certainly.
So thus far, I've heard comments and concerns about the Regional Planning Group modified numbers.
Okay.
I think it's been exclusively to those factors. Mr. Ruiz?
Just a point of clarification, maybe this helps, but the water, the Edwards water in Frio, obviously is outside the EA jurisdiction. And you're right, it's available for use, but you can't transfer the permit from Frio County into the Edwards. In other words, you can't take that water availability and apply it to the Edwards and pump it in Medina County, for example. You could use it in Medina County, but you have to pipe it in. Physically. Yeah, physically.
Physically, that's correct.
Could y'all hear that online? A little bit? If you'll point your
A
face.
little bit.
So the point being, what you're suggesting, if I may, I don't even authorize the comment period, but this is, so you're saying if somebody wanted to develop an Edwards Aquifer well field in northern Frio County along the Medina County line, they could drill those wells and then get a transport permit from the Evergreen, because it's permitted through the Evergreen, to transfer up to that availability as determined by the Edwards into Medina County. And we're not talking about inconsequential amount of water, 25,000 or 23,000 acre feet of water.
Right.
Okay.
And not making any statement about the quality of that water for requiring treatment or whatever, but that's.
Well, I assume that if it's available, it would be, well, that's a good question.
Yeah. But to your point, there's no separation of brackish versus.
But that doesn't affect the EAA's, that doesn't affect the EA's pumping limits. They're
No.
restricted volumes.
No.
So this is outside the Edwards, even though it's Edwards water from across the line, it's outside the Edwards limitations.
Correct.
Okay.
And could I address one thing that
Sure.
you and Mr. Andrews were discussing? So for Wilson County, Carrizo, we are not suggesting any RWPG estimated groundwater availabilities. We are accepting the MAG.
Okay, so my question really then becomes with the MAG and how they distinguish between fresh water and brackish water for this availability number.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's something we can look into. Thank you.
I assume it's a requirement to have the TWDB developed MAG values reported in this interim technical memorandum.
Yes, sir. It's included in a DB 27 report.
Is it required to have the Regional Water Planning Group modified MAG values provided in this technical memorandum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough. Is there any other?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to follow up on that. I didn't think, based on what you explained earlier, Lauren, that we were modifying MAG values. I think it would be helpful for me if you have the methodology that you're going through in order to come up with these availability estimates written down somewhere that I can look at.
Sure. They're included in the technical memorandum. It's
Okay.
a narrative description of the methodology, and there are more detailed references in there, like specific references to specific reports that would be easy to copy paste and look for them, or I can send them to you, those information sources. And you're correct, we are not modifying any MAG values. We are accepting the MAG values as is, and in some instances, we are estimating groundwater availabilities that may differ from the MAG. Or in some instances, for the Edwards VOC aquifer, we're providing availabilities where none exist because there is no MAG.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to really read up on this. I feel a little uncomfortable about the idea of estimating groundwater availabilities on our own, particularly if we haven't gotten approval from the EAA or from any of the districts that this might impact. I'm just trying to also figure out the like implications from it. So I have some studying to do on my end, and definitely want to circle back to this issue in May. And I'll try to be there in person so I can actually see who's speaking.
And of course, in the meantime, you're welcome to reach out to me by phone, email, and we can discuss it in more detail. Just to clarify one thing though, if we did not estimate availabilities for the Edwards BFC, there would be zero. It would just be, there would be nothing and no water available for any WUGs, including SAWs, including NBU, CBLGC, all these different entities would have zero water available to them. So this is a necessary step that we have to take to, and I would also state that this was approved in a sense, not approved, but this was developed in conjunction with EAA every step of the way in terms of really reliable supply, and then all of these numbers were provided and presented to them, and any concerns were worked through. I also have to say, this methodology that we're using for the Edwards BFC aquifer to estimate those groundwater availabilities has been done in the regional water planning process for Region O for several planning cycles. So this is not any different from last cycle. It's just updated numbers.
Okay. Yeah, and it could just be my I'm not quite understanding the full picture, and so that's why I'm going to look into it. It's just that when you say groundwater availability in the Edwards Balcones Fault Zone, I mean, I serve on the board of the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, and I mean, we issue conditional permits, so there really isn't any more water available. So if the groundwater available, so if that number is like considering water that's already being used, like I think that makes sense. But I just wonder, when we say availability, it makes it seem like there's more to permit. And while we do issue conditional permits, like those are, subject to 100% curtailment during drought. So it's, there's just a lot of nuances that I feel like I need to understand how all those pieces fit together.
Sure, and for the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, that data obviously went into DFC development, and then went into the Texas Water Development Board's development of the MAG reports and those MAG volumes. And so when it comes to the BSEACD data, we are going by the book in terms of what the board has provided to us with those MAG volumes. And so even though it's called availabilities, that's basically, here's the volume of water that would be available to any WUG that already, for the purposes of the BSEACD, would be available to WUGs that have permits. And so I wouldn't look at this from the standpoint of whether or not that water is already permitted. It's really a matter of, this is the volume of water that would satisfy DFCs for that particular aquifer, for that particular county, for that particular basin. And so we're only looking at whatever the MAG was developed. So if you have concerns about the volumes, I would refer you to the MAG report for that area. Oh, okay, she thumbs up. Okay. Are there any other questions, discussion?
I say we move forward to considering accepting the technical memo with thanks to our staff for explaining it so well to us, and keeping in mind that we'll be making adjustments up until we can't anymore. And I think the big thing is, how are we gonna handle any requests from TWDB? That's what I don't understand yet.
how are we gonna handle any request from TWDB?
While they're processing the technical memorandum, that's the third item on our list here, and I guess, we let our technical consultants answer that, but they tell us what's going on at our next meeting, right?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that's the case.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
If Diane's statement was in the form of a motion, I'll second it, so we can approve this and move on.
I'll so move.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? There being none, anyone opposed to the motion, speak up. There being no opposition, we'll show the motion passed by consensus.
Essentially, for the note taker, my motion covers the things under recommendation here. Much more concise than I was.
So the next matter, well, I don't have the slide before me. I guess that also includes authorization to submit that technical memorandum to TWB. Okay. So it says, okay, let's move to agenda item 11.
And so, if you look at the agenda, I present this next agenda item 11, and then there's agenda items 12 and 13 that are presented by other folks, and then I have another agenda item 14. Would it be all right with you all if I move from 11 into 14 and kind of shift the order slightly? I'm happy to come back up here, but just for efficiency.
You want to take up agenda item 14, discussion appropriate action regarding the establishment of additional subcommittees?
After 11, yes, sir.
After 11.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. Let's go to the list.
Okay, so agenda item 11 is the consideration and approval regarding task 5B, scope of work. So task 5B is the evaluation of water management strategies, and this is a bit different than other tasks in the regional water planning sphere. With task 5, we must identify the different strategies that we plan to evaluate and submit, and also estimate the budgetary effort that is expected for each of those strategies, submit the scope of work to the board and request notice to proceed. So they would review this scope of work. And so we put together a scope of work, and it's included on the large tabloid size papers shown here on your tables, and it's also included in a handout fee for those attending virtually. And in summary, the scope of work includes this list of water management strategies, and I'll go through some of them with you. So for the vast majority of these strategies, they are carried forward from the previous plan. Those are identified as just a regular bullet point in black text. The legend for all of this is in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. So we have identified new strategies for this cycle, and those include non-municipal water conservation. So in the previous plan, we only had advanced water conservation associated with municipal water user groups. And so it has been a goal of mine for this planning cycle to attempt to address the significant unmet needs for irrigation and livestock, especially those that are in the Nueces Basin. And so as part of that, I believe that there are irrigation users, livestock users, and other non-municipal users who already implement conservation methodologies that can and should be quantified and accounted for in the regional water plan, so that we can accurately depict whether or not those unmet needs exist. And then we can also develop strategies to address those in the future, in the next 50-year planning horizon. And so the non-municipal water conservation strategy is new for this cycle. I'm also proposing a new strategy, the brackish groundwater development. So this, in the previous plan, it was just groundwater development, and it lumped in fresh and brackish together. But because they are distinct enough in terms of infrastructure, in terms of treatment. I'd like to separate them out for clarity, for efficiency. A couple other new ones that were added are brush management and rainwater harvesting. These were requested to be included by a couple of WUGs in the supplies and water management strategy survey. And this would be for rainwater harvesting, this would be focused on WUG level efforts for rainwater harvesting. So it's not necessarily, the occasional home here and there that might install rainwater catchment barrels or something like that. It's really aimed at WUGs that have or plan to implement programs for utility-wide rainwater harvesting programs. And then the fifth water management strategy that's new is the SAWS Regional Wilcox Project. This is not necessarily new, however. The SAWS Expanded Brackish Groundwater Project, just above it, was included in the previous plan, and it included, I believe, 4 phases for that project. And so the SAWS Regional Wilcox Project takes the final 2 phases, splits them out into a new strategy. Volumetrically, the 2 strategies combined are the same as the previous cycle 1 strategy. It's just, this is for consistency with SAWS's planning efforts that we have separated them. And then we've gone ahead and identified the top 4 budget efforts. So as I mentioned, we identified the anticipated estimated budget associated with each of these strategies. And the most expensive ones are advanced water conservation, because there are so many WUGs. Non-municipal water conservation, because it's new, and also there are likely to be so many WUGs. Fresh groundwater development, again, there are many WUGs there. And then the 4th one is the GBRA Water Secure strategy. So this strategy is not necessarily new for this cycle. It is a combination of 2 strategies that were included in the previous plan. So it's a combination of the GBRA Mid-Basin Phase 2 project, and then also the GBRA Lower Basin Storage Project. Those combined equal the GBRA Water Secure. And that one is a high budget effort because it's very large. It includes a lot of environmental impact evaluations, water availability modeling, lots of modeling. So, thanks, Junior. And are there any questions on these strategies included in your handout or on the screen? Yes, sir.
When you state top 4 budgeted efforts, are you talking about with regards to our constraints with our budget?
Yes.
So are you going to be asking at some point for additional funding?
No, sir. It's not really constraints. It's really, for each of these strategies, we assigned a budget amount. And I just wanted to highlight which ones were the most expensive.
Okay, thank you.
And that's in terms of our effort to evaluate them. Yes. If there aren't any other questions, we have some recommended action items.
Is there any discussion? Okay, let's see if we can go through this. Is there a motion to approve and authorize the technical consultant to submit the notice to proceed scope of work request to Texas Water Development Board?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing opposition to the motion. There being none, we'll show the motion passes by consensus. Is there a motion to authorize the technical consultant or San Antonio River Authority to provide additional information required by PWDB related to the notice to proceed scope of work request?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposition to that motion? We'll show the motion passed by consensus. Is there a motion to authorize San Antonio River Authority to negotiate and execute subsequent PWDB contract amendments related to the notice to proceed scope of work request?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, we'll show the motion passed by consensus. Does that cover all the matters for agenda item 11?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you would, please proceed to agenda item 14.
Thank you. So this is discussion and appropriate action regarding the establishment of additional subcommittees. You all have seen the slide before. Regional has historically established subcommittees to tackle complex technical subjects. We've established subcommittees for population and water demands, for rural community outreach, and today I am proposing that you'll consider establishing the policy recommendations work group. This work group was established in previous planning cycles, and the roles and responsibilities are to meet and collaboratively draft Chapter 8, which is the recommendations regarding meeting of stream segments and or reservoir sites, and the legislative and regional policy issues. So this includes lots of recommendations that are provided to either the Texas Water Development Board or legislative actions, and those are compiled into the state water plan and considered by the ledge whenever they have a legislative session. And so in the past, there has been, the planning group has established a work group, and then there have been typically 3 meetings that are rather lengthy, 2 hours, 3 hours in length, to review the previous plans chapter, add new policies, revise, and so forth. Usually the first meeting is to determine the goals and the meeting schedule, and then a few more meetings to continue drafting that chapter. And the goal is to complete the draft Chapter 8 for presentation at the November meeting. And so if we establish it today, we would have plenty of time to have those meetings, and then convene at the November 7th meeting and present the results of that.
Thank you. Okay. So it looks as though we're going to establish this subcommittee, provided we can find members willing to serve on it. Subcommittee. Are there any members present or attending virtually that are willing to serve on this committee?
I am, if we can have some Zoom meetings, or is it all gonna be in person? What do you think?
I think it'll be hybrid.
Okay, well then I'll serve.
Okay, so.
And a quick question on the responsibilities. I heard you say that we would be responsible for drafting the chapter. Is that, how much assistance do you all provide with that?
We actively draft the chapter together in the past, but it's obviously up to the subcommittee or the planning group's desires to dictate how you all want to develop it. In the past, we have literally wordsmithed sentences, commas, in real time on a screen to develop this chapter. And it's all consensus driven.
Okay. So
I would like representing Texas Parks and Wildlife, if maybe not like an official member of the work group, but to attend the meetings, just to be aware of what's going on and perhaps provide some input.
the meetings will be open to all membership. There'll be open meetings, incidentally, published meeting notices, etc. So there won't be any exclusion of interested parties. Now that we've established that there are interested parties, we'll establish the committee. Diane, if you'll serve on the committee, Puente, Jonathan, are you interested? Mr. Messler, you're interested? So we'll consider that committee established, open membership to any and all Region L planning group members. Is there someone who'd like, well, I'm sorry, rather, Kai, would you please coordinate with those members to identify the first meeting date at which you can set out your chair for that subcommittee and the rest of the cycle, of course, with the objective of reporting back at the November meeting with a recommendation.
Can you name the people who did say that they're willing to serve? Ms. Crozier, Jonathan with GBRA.
Okay, let's do it this way then. Those of you who are interested in serving on that subcommittee, if you would, please speak up and state your first name and last name.
Robert Quinn.
Jonathan Stinson.
Steve Metzler.
Okay, so.
Dan Yapsall.
So VIP staffing has not.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Dan Yoxel.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Please include me on that as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Diane Wasenick, yeah.
I got you down, Diane.
Mr. Ramos, what's your question?
I've got a question with regards to the technical memorandum and this coordination effort, as you indicated, with regards to revisions that need to occur because it's a puzzle. Not that I'm advocating for a subcommittee, but how do we suppose we're going to address this issue with regards to these need for input so that we can move forward with regards to putting the puzzle together?
Sure, I mean, that's, establishing a subcommittee to address those is definitely an option if the planning group chooses to.
I think it's important that everybody understands what we're talking about. It's important to get the feedback so that we can put the puzzle together. We can move along, so I'm just.
What's the purpose of the subcommittee though? To revise the draft technical memorandum?
Well, I'm hearing there's comments.
No, I understand.
There's comments and people are unclear and, groundwater districts, and I guess the idea was to ensure that if we're gonna have some revisions, the revisions are collective. And they understand and present to the board, the planning, understand what these revisions are, we move forward with that, we insert it. Because right now we have a technical memorandum draft, just move this process up faster, as opposed to bits and pieces and bits.
Right.
It's coordinated effort done, we move on.
I don't think that the subcommittee would necessarily address the tech memo, but the contents of the tech memo associated with the SCTRWPG estimated groundwater availabilities. So potentially be like a groundwater availabilities subcommittee.
I'm just wanting to be clear on what the objective is. They have a deadline in early March to submit the report, so revising the memorandum would be challenging to complete by that timeline, I think.
I mean, it could certainly be, the subcommittee could be convened and then go through those concerns in a more detailed fashion and then develop recommendations to the planning group in terms of how those availabilities are captured in the plan.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. Are there members that are interested in forming a subcommittee to review groundwater availability values used within regional water plan?
I would be interested in participating in that.
McBride. McBride. There's interest, will form the subcommittee. Are there any other members than those mentioned that would like to serve on that committee? Please state your name now so we can record it and coordinate appropriately. Add me to the list, please.
I think Erin raised her hand.
Okay, so I have Tim Andrus, Andrew McBride, Vanessa Pugh-Williams, Aaron Teague.
Okay.
Rebecca Ramos, see.
Yeah, I'll do it.
This too would be a committee. They're hold open meetings. Membership isn't meant to exclude any members. Any members that decide to participate can do so when that meeting is called and public notice is made. Guy with that, if you coordinate that group after the meeting schedule. The meetings, I appreciate it.
That concludes my slides, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's move back in the agenda here. We'll move to, well, let me ask the group, it's my intention to proceed through and not stop for lunch. I'm not certain what sort of time requirements are needed for the next items. Would the membership appreciate a, let's call it a 10-minute break? Okay, take a 10-minute break, reconvene at 11:30. Okay, let's walk down the chain. You want to get here? I don't know yet. Yes. But you will? Well, that's good. I appreciate that. I think the next meeting, We're going to proceed with, I suppose someone might make a nomination late. That's happened in the past, but it's not. If you can find where you fit into that.
Have you seen them before?
You don't have to self-nominate. Yeah. You be selected. There may be a sense.
I need to come by.
Yeah, right. So, that'd be great. So, at the next meeting, we just, touch base.
Okay, so one of them was for the GNA 10, and then the other one was for GNA 13. So what we did was we took values for each basin, for each of those, then summed them, and then that's how we got.
I'll take
That will be available in the future.
It sounded like a good idea.
Came in here this morning. Nothing to say,
Do you know how to, or do I need data? He gave me. Will they bring it up?
Maybe that's always been the case. Oh, well, thanks for saying so. I hope
Yes.
Once every 3 months.
Always that.
Fill big shoes.
Yep, once moved on.
Well, we'll see, we're retired.
I'm thinking
One done.
Well, actually, I started reading back in 2008, 2009, timeframe that John satisfied with that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I moved on and I'm obviously working out.
Oh, I love to play.
What do you think?
I'm not used to people just smiling.
Yeah, they've got a lot of small. Yeah. No, that's gonna surprise me.
I saw some paper.
I'm familiar with that.
We conserve water, not trees. Ma'am.
They still.
Okay, Tom. Yeah, definitely. Call one more.
A lot of cases, you know, that's gone so none of that's
Yeah, not. That meeting in Waverly Friday night, 400.
That's why I was gonna write that.
That's A lot of
I didn't hardly slip. I was so mad by the time hearing about architects. Those people are off the charts, renegades, rogues. Hi! Gosh, I haven't seen you in a long time. What are you up to? I am It seems like I heard what I like now.
Good to see you. I didn't realize you were a native.
How big is your little? No.
Okay, I show 11:30 by my watch. Let's reconvene the meeting. Still recording?
That's right.
Were we recording the entire time? Okay. Okay, we're gonna pick up with agenda item 12. Jonathan, I believe you're gonna make a presentation to the group here. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jonathan Stinson. I'm Deputy General Manager at GBRA. I appreciate being with y'all at every meeting and this meeting. I have a brief presentation on a request that we have to amend the 2021 Regional Plan and the 2022 State Water Plan. This is a bifurcated request. We're actually seeking a minor amendment designation from the Water Development Board's Executive Administrator, and we'll receive input and feedback from them on that. And then we'll continue to proceed with the amendment process for amending the water plan. I was laughing and thinking back, 7 years ago, I got to present to Region L for GBRA to do a water plan amendment. And so it's not Back to the Future, it's Back to the Future 2. So then we were amending the 2011 Regional Water Plan. And so today we're here to amend the 2021 Regional Water Plan. A lot of people ask, why are we doing this? This is taken directly from the Water Development Board, but there's a number of reasons people would request an amendment or a waiver to the existing water plans. One, based on change conditions, and then more specifically to our project and our needs, is to be eligible to apply for the SWIFT funding. More specifically, the rules indicate only the project components specified in the plan are eligible for SWIFT financing. And so that's where we'll focus on our requesting. You know, I love the regional water planning process, the bottom-up process that everyone touts and advocates and celebrates. You know, it's an iterative process. It's a 5-year cycle, as we all know. But unfortunately, sometimes that planning cycle isn't synced up with the funding cycle. And so, as we all know, because we've already adopted the population projection demands and revisions, but these two slides kind of give a comparative between the 2021 projections that we adopted years ago and then the increases that we've seen for the 2026 plan. And as you can see, you know, a few years ago we were planning a little over 5 million people over the planning horizon, and now the adopted projections show over 7.5 million people through the planning horizon. Bringing that down to the way we're looking at it in just a portion of our basin at GBRA, our upper 5 counties, Caldwell, Comal, Guadalupe, Hayes, and Kendall counties. This graph shows what the population has actually done and then the previous water plans and what those projections looked at over those planning horizons. And as you can see, the population growth is real. Just alone from the last planning cycle's projections of what the population would be in 2045, with this new demands, you're seeing that same population growth has been brought forward almost a complete decade. So The last planning cycle, just 5 years ago, we were planning on having sufficient water supplies and strategies available to meet that projected need, but because of this growth that we're seeing just in our upper and mid basin alone, has identified our need to expedite and combine some existing water management strategies that GBRA has in the existing water plans. And as Lauren alluded previously, we're calling it Water Secure, and essentially it's the combination of the existing mid-basin project and the lower basin off-channel storage project. In this amendment, all we are seeking is to add the component of the transmission pipeline. So in this amendment, we're not seeking to necessarily go back and change yield or sizing or additional data. The reason we're bringing this forward now, as you saw in Lauren's presentation, it was already identified to be further baked in the next state water plan. But again, due to the growth, the population growth and interaction with our customers, there is a likelihood that we will need to seek SWIFT planning dollars as soon as February 2025. And so therefore, we need to have it and all of its components identified in the existing state water plan that the Water Development Board will look to at the time that they're considering the SWIFT applications next year. And so this would ensure that the Water Secure project is eligible for those initial dollars. Moving forward through the current planning cycle, we believe that acquisition, additional design, construction dollars would be sought in future SWIFT cycles. Where I'm supposed to be pointing, I'm falling victim to, there we go.
Sorry, John.
Yes, sir?
If you go back to the next slide, our previous slide, the map diagram. So for our purposes, when we're talking about the plan we're working on, and you refer to, or anyone refers to GBRA Water Secure, that's the consolidation of the previous plans, existing GBRA mid-basin project, existing, or the GBRA lower basin off-channel reservoir, and the new component, the pipeline. Is that accurate?
I believe, yes, just to maybe repeat or restate that, but when we're talking about Water Secure, that is a new project water management strategy that will be fully identified in the new water plan. But it is the combination of those two existing strategies in the existing water plan. However, adding this transmission line, currently the lower basin off-channel water management strategy does have a transmission line component identified. However, it is identified as less than 1 mile long. And so in wanting to be transparent and engaging with the Water Development Board to see if they need any additional information related to that, that's why the actual action items are a little more vague and nebulous, because it's amending one or both of the strategies. And that's the feedback we'll receive in the next 30 days from the Water Development Board, and then again come back to the Regional Water Planning Group in May for actual, the next steps moving forward to amend the plan. Just real quick, and I'll answer your question. The goal is to get this to the Water Development Board by this winter so they can button up the 2022 state water plan again, so we can be eligible for an application as early as February 25. Yes, sir.
So just, you're combining the 59,000 plus 27,000, so this is 85,000 acre feet, or how does that work, the total volume?
So in terms of what we're doing for this amendment, we're not going to change these yields. That's part of the broader evaluation that we've already undertaken, is to see, based on modeling, because there's two separate existing surface water rights that GBRA has, what is the most efficient way to firm those up, depending on the seasonality based on the drought of record. And then also what this includes is the aquifer storage and recovery, the ASR component. and that's still being fleshed out. So those total yields of the combined will be further fleshed out in the 2026.
So as a quick follow-up, you mentioned ASR. So the ASR component is storage. Obviously, they're somewhere in the Carrizo aquifer, but is that treated surface water?
Yes.
That's unusual. So that's the intent of the ASR, is to store treated surface water into the Carrizo aquifer in that location, in the general location.
The general location.
I'm not asking you to define where and how and what. It's highly unusual to think of treated surface water being stored in the Carrizo aquifer.
You know, we've talked a lot about ASR for a very long time, and there's not a whole lot of examples. I think we're spoiled in this region with saws scalping the Edwards and doing that ASR. So this is different. It's gotta be treated to drinking water standards to inject it. So I'm sorry?
It's a little more than that. Anyway, I don't want to disrupt. I just wanted to be clear that was your source of water for the ASR.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? It's gonna be real cheap. Again, a high-level overview from information from the administrative code related to the requirements and the process for minor amendments. This does not result in an over-allocation of a water source. The relation to a new reservoir, this isn't a new reservoir since it's been previously identified and adopted. It does not increase unmet needs or reduce unmet needs. As Lauren mentioned, Black and Beach will conduct all the necessary environmental analysis and evaluations, but since these are our existing senior run-of-the-river rights, all of environmental flows and other considerations have already been permitted. And there you go. I guess the next step is really to have the Regional Water Planning Group take action to pursue the amendment. In addition, request the Executive Administrator of the Water Development Board for the minor amendment determination. And my next slide hopefully will show a chart that the Water Development Board provided. So if everyone can read that, you don't need glasses. Essentially this is a chart that's available on the Water Development Board's website that shows kind of a bifurcated process between major amendment and minor. Again, we're seeking the minor amendment designation. And so I've just added onto this chart the dates in which hopefully we'll be able to proceed to enable the Water Development Board enough time for their process later this fall and winter. And that's really, I think, all of, I just hit the button on the screen. Are you doing it for me? Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know if it's working or not. Happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Could you explain for the membership the initial work you've done locally to present this idea in advance to municipalities, local governments, that sort of thing along that pipeline, source location, destination, and in particular, have you received any feedback expressing opposition to the plan that we're doing?
I guess initially, being a wholesale regional water supplier, obviously a lot of our customers and entities, many of you in this room, are experiencing the same growth. I think when we looked at these population projection demands that were coming out and kind of doing our own initial analysis of available water supplies, it showed the need to, while both of these existing management strategies are still slated for the 2020 decade, it showed that, you know, combining them was probably most efficient to meet not only the upper and mid basin needs, but have available yield for the lower basin needs as well. So I think initially we've already had conversations probably with over 24 entities from the upper to the lower basin of industrial, municipal, and mainly. So I think we're still in the feedback process, getting additional comments and information back from entities that may be interested in participating in this. We've had some conversations on the sidebar, but feedback that we're getting shows that there's a demand both for treated water supplies and raw water supplies, depending on the entity and their abilities to either expand existing treatment capacity within their utility, or if they're looking for a treated commodity, if you will, like ASR. We have retained Black and Beach. GBRA's board already voted last year to make an investment to kick the project off, recognizing the timing of funding and needs and the 2030 decade really bearing down on us. And that seems to be the time that's really critical or the soonest for our customers in which they've identified needing additional supplies. Sorry, I said more than what you asked.
You got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jonathan, I think I need a refresher to my memory on what the Mid-Basin project consists of. It's not just ASR. Well fields, is there an off-channel reservoir?
So 7 years ago when we did the amendment, it was initially just the diversion, surface water diversion. The substitution that we did was this conjunctive use mid-basin strategy, which is a combination of the surface water diversion and ASR. The off-channel storage, that's a variable that's still being considered while it's permitted. I think the storage concept is more to the conversation I just had with Mr. Brownlow of a settling basin to capture the surface water for treatment prior to injection.
And so there's no separate well fields besides what's connected with ASR?
In this project, correct.
Okay.
The well fields that GBRA has, the Crizo well fields that we have is a joint project with Alliance Regional Water, and those are the 24,000 acre feet that we have permitted for that groundwater.
Thank you.
Yep. Sir.
So this is just moving up timing wise, is when these projects get kicked off, is that the amendment?
Actually, no, it's really the addition of the transmission line component between them, because they are still slated for the online in the current water plan for the 2020 decade. And we've made the necessary investments, actions, permits, etc., that didn't make it fall off or make it infeasible. So again, really all the amendment that we're looking for today is just the transmission line component.
And then what makes this a minor versus major amendment? I'm kind of ignorant of that description.
It's, can I punt to Michelle to give a probably more summarized answer than I would give?
Back 2 slides, right? Yeah, go back a couple of slides. There you go.
Joe, you want to say that?
No, keep going. There you go.
So I guess if there was a new reservoir.
Right, I saw that, so I was just wondering what makes, so major amendment, how's that different?
Major amendments would be if it results in over allocation, if it's related to a major reservoir.
If it was a, I guess, new water management strategy that hadn't been previously identified. And then I guess the major difference, unintended, sorry, I thought it was funny, is some public process and additional meetings that would need to be held that would potentially extend the timeline. Yes, sir.
Let me follow up with my ASR question, because the ASR component of this was part of the 2021 plan, or that's part of the new plan?
It's in the current plan.
It's in the current plan?
Yes.
In the 21 plan?
Yes.
I mean, it really complicated the concept for, again, storing surface water in an ASR. I mean, we don't even allow water wells to be screened in separate aquifers, for the concerns about commingling. And I know that the SAWS ASR was specifically designed to scalp Edwards water because of challenges that the Evergreen had with the storage of surface treated water in the Carrizo. An enormous history went under, a lot of water went under that bridge a decade or more ago. But would that imply that SAWS could pursue storing treated SA River water in their ASR as an alternative, similar to what you're doing, proposing?
I don't think this is the venue that we would want to talk about different water, surface water right implications to do those different things.
But that's the type of, I'm not asking for an answer necessarily.
Okay.
But that's the concern I would have just as this component. But I don't want to interfere.
Well, you know, I think TCEQ has some regulations regarding water quality in terms of ASR, ensuring that that moves forward. You know, Black and Beach is our technical consultant on this with others as well, looking at the different zones of both the Carrizo and the Wilcox. And I think we've had positive conversations with other stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if I may, Tarrant Regional Water District is working on a pilot with the Trinity River Authority to do just that on one of their projects. They're treating surface water coming out of some of the large reservoirs and doing injection wells right into the project treatment plants, and then being able to pull that out in time. But it's not unprecedented.
Yeah, I think the three different examples that I'm aware of, SAWS, El Paso, Kerrville, I don't know if they're actually online or not. But you know, it's all different source waters. Some is treated effluent, some is groundwater, and some is surface.
Jonathan, I got a question with regards to what you presented. I appreciate the fact that you planned, coordinated, and bring this to us. Question I have, did you say you're going to come back again for another amendment, or are you going to go to the Water Development Board for more money? It's like, kind of unclear what you stated here. So this is the only amendment you're asking for correctly now for the final conclusion, correct?
Correct. I was referencing 7 years ago, we had an amendment. Now this is a two-step process. This is the first step for us to engage with the Water Development Board. Once we receive their feedback and instruction in May, we'll come back and have to adopt the actual amendment.
The first step of the process is they're coming in and their amendment request is actually what we call a minor amendment determination. Right now, we've had some legal discussions with GBRA already, and we think right now that it's going to be a minor amendment, but that is subject to full legal review and approval, all depending on their interpretation of whether an off-channel reservoir constitutes a new reservoir, which would have implications for a lot of regional water planning groups. If the board comes back and says, yes, we agree, it's a minor amendment, GBRA will proceed, and in the May meeting, they'll present some other materials. Otherwise, they're gonna have to come back in with a major amendment.
I'm sorry. My understanding was the request for today is for this group to agree to make a request of TWDB to make a determination whether it's a minor, if it's a minor amendment. And if it is, to authorize the procedure, move forward so that we could adopt the amendment, the minor amendment at the May meeting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Presumably, if the determination ultimately is it does not qualify as a minor amendment, we're back here in May to discuss that outcome, potentially how they may want to proceed.
Correct.
Commissioner?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Jensen. So under the slide change conditions, you talk about the population of Caldwell, Camagua, Whitney, Hayes, and Kendall, which are pretty much your service areas, right? And then I'm looking at this map and not real clear. Where is this ASR? What county is that? Is that?
It has yet to be cited.
Oh.
It would be Gonzales, Caldwell County.
Okay. And then the well fields, you know, with your Alliant project, those are in Gonzales County, right?
They're right on the county line, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then help me understand, do these pipelines terminate just east of I-35? Am I seeing that, or are they gonna come across into?
Those delivery points will be worked out once we have additional feedback from potential participants.
Okay, and what's the plan for bringing that into Kendall?
It'll be dependent on utilities there, identifying needs, and then to see if, I guess, it's financially feasible, depending on the volumes.
So they look like there's kind of stubbed out terminus there, but that's not necessarily so.
On this, I guess where you see the, where they end are in existing water treatment plants to existing customers. So that we're looking for all efficiencies, and so, you know, any way we can utilize pre-existing right-of-ways that have additional pipeline capacity, that's what we would look for first, and then work with our customers to see if the additional delivery points are needed.
Is Western Canyon on there? I really can't.
No.
It's not.
It is not identified. Everything that you're seeing right now is east of 35.
But if utilities in Kendall were interested, they could have a conversation about being a partner in this project, bringing the water across I-35, tying into Western Canyon, and coming into Kendall.
Potentially.
And are you having those discussions now?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any additional discussion regarding the questions, or any additional questions for Mr. Finch? All right. Is there any additional discussion regarding that?
Thank you so kindly.
Well, let me ask the group. Is there a motion to approve and authorize San Antonio River Authority to submit a minor amendment determination request to TWDB for modifications to GBRE's proposed lower basin storage and/or mid-basin phase 2 water management strategy projects as described in the 2021 South Central Texas Regional Water Planning Group, the 2022 State Water Plan?
So moved.
Okay, second. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any opposition to that motion? Okay, there being none, we'll show that motion's passed by consensus. Please make that submitted.
So it's submit.
Is there, the component aspect here. In addition, is there a motion to authorize San Antonio River Authority to pursue a minor amendment to the 2021 South Central Texas Regional Water Plan for modifications to GBRE's proposed lower basin storage and/or mid-basin phase 2 water management strategy project? That's the second part.
So good, sir.
A minor amendment. Okay. So if it's determined that there's a minor amendment, San Antonio River Authority is going to proceed with the process, bring forward the amendment for consideration at the next meeting. We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Any opposition to the motion? Being none, we'll show that motion passed by consensus. Okay, let's move to agenda item 13, discussion and possible action regarding the consistency waiver for TWDB project 21825, Crystal Clear SUD 2024 capital improvement project. We have representatives of the SUD present.
Yes, sir.
Would you please go to the podium there, introduce yourself, and proceed with your presentation.
It's still morning, so good morning. I am Carissa Parker, and I'm with M&S Engineering out of New Braunfels. I am here to represent Crystal Clear Special Utility District in this consistency waiver request. Let me just start by saying, I'll give you all a little description of where Crystal Clear is, in case some of you don't know. They operate a public water system, about 204 square miles, mainly in Guadalupe County and in some portions of Hays and Comal. So they are tucked neatly right between New Braunfels, San Marcos, and Seguin, which you all know is a very, very fast growing area. They have 3 Trinity wells, as you can see located on this map, and I'll try to explain where it is. It's in the southeastern corner of Comal County. If y'all are familiar with the River Chase subdivision and the Martin Marietta quarry off of Hunter Road, the wells are tucked right between those two. The wells were drilled in 2012, but they are just holes in the ground at this time. Okay. So as I was saying, the wells were drilled in 2012. At that time, they were really just exploring to see what other water sources were out there for the district. And when they were drilled back in 2012, they were just tested for water quality and potential productivity. They had no need to actually complete those wells back in 2012. They've done some water quality testing on them since then. But at this time, because of all the recent increase in growth in the area, Crystal Clear has a demand for additional water source. This project specifically that Crystal Clear is requesting or has an application out for defund money through the Texas Water Development Board. This project was not in the last Region L state water plan, which is why we're here today. Basically, the project as it stands currently that they're asking funding for is really just for the development and completion of these 3 wells. So because they're open holes in the ground, they are not, they're open to multiple sections of the Trinity. We were gonna do some packer testing on them to decide which layers, upper or middle of the Trinity has better water quality or productivity, and then actually complete the wells so that they can be permitted. The wells are currently registered with the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District, but they have not been permitted. Based on the water quality and productivity testing that was done earlier, I would say like between 2012 and 2015, we think the 3 Trinity wells combined can produce somewhere around 2,463 gallons per minute. Back to the funding that they're requesting specifically just for this project, it's right around $2.3 million. Is there a delay? Very good. I want to talk just a little bit about the need for this project. It really all boils down to the growth in the area. When we look back at numbers, population numbers for Crystal Clear's district over the last 5 to 6 years, they were somewhere around 3% between 2019 and 2021, and then there was this massive spike. So in the last 2-3 years, we've seen 12% annual growth year to year. And based on the service agreements they have in place, that growth is going to continue at that 12% annual rate, at least for the next few years. If you look at the differences between these two numbers, the 3% growth versus 12% growth, you can see currently now they have 6,000 connections in their system. If they continue to grow at 3% over the next 20 years, they're at 12,500, so they'll about double. But if they continue at the 12% rate, which we all think is coming, we're looking at 70,000 in the next 20 years. These charts, I don't know if you can see them well enough, but basically these tables rather just show what the population projections look like over the next 20 years plus the water demand. So you can really see the difference, you know, in that 2045 area, that if we do hit that 12% growth projection, we're looking at 23,000 to 24,000 acre feet of water a year. I really think there's a delay with the button. Okay. This slide also just kind of is a follow-up from the last slide. We give you a better idea of what available supplies they have currently versus what we think Crystal Clear Set is going to need over the next 20 years. Again, if they continue at a 3% growth rate, they're not gonna need a new water source until 2040. However, if they continue at that 12% projected demand, they're gonna need a new water source by 2028, which is not that far away. It's almost not enough time to develop a well field. Oops. I think I covered most of this during the first slide, but basically the funding request is for the planning and construction of this project. The design is already complete. The design and the permitting, all of that is already complete. So, of course, with funding, we'll have to go through some environmental planning, and then we would like to use these dollars also for the construction portion. The project also includes some land clearing, some gates, an all-weather access road, and just general access to the 3 wells because they're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. These wells are also located a few miles away from the district's existing Edwards wells, and there's enough space on that site for blending tanks, so if needed, depending on the water quality, this Trinity water could be blended with the Edwards to meet potable water quality requirements. Thank you. We did consider some alternatives prior to jumping into the Trinity, the completion of these wells. As most of you probably know, Crystal Clear gets a lot of their water from SCTRWPG. So there were some discussions about additional water rights from either their Hayes Caldwell or their Lake Dunlap sources. There is no water available from either of those sources. Crystal Clear also has 300 acre-feet of GBRA water that they cannot access because there's no place to treat it. And there's no plans for expanding treatment capacity at Lake Dunlap for CRWA at this time. And there's also been a lot of discussions with neighboring purveyors and municipal districts to see if anybody has water available to share. As most of you know, there's not a lot of sharing out there there's not enough water out there available to share, I guess I should say. Next slide. Okay. Again, we've covered some of this. The 2,463 gallons per minute that's expected out of these wells would equate to almost 2,000 acre-feet per year. And that's if you're pumping all 3 of those wells at about 12 hours per day. We did look at the historical groundwater pumping data and existing allocations as they were written into the 2021 Regional Water Plan. Based on that information, we are seeing that there is additional water available from the Trinity Aquifer source, specifically in Comal County. So if you can go to the next slide. This information was taken directly off of Texas Water Development Board's website from their planning and water use surveys. As you can see, in the last 3 years, or 2019 to 2021, they were pumping about 10,000, maybe a little over 10,000 acre-feet of water per year out of the Trinity Aquifer in Comal County. Next slide. This information is straight out of the Regional Water Plan. Per their per the plan, there's 43,768 acre feet of water per year available out of the Trinity Aquifer. And only 16,000 of that has been allocated. So you can see what the remaining acre feet is. It's almost 27,000 acre feet of water per year. I know this data now is, about 3 years old and you're working on a new plan, but it looks like there's plenty of water there for Crystal Clear to develop these wells. Next slide. I'll give you a little more information on the project itself and just everything else that the district has done to prepare for this project. I know that map is a little hard to see, but if you can see the blue dashed line on the map, the wells, the 3 wells are kind of in that top kind of northwest corner of the property. They do not own the property, but they do have an agreement with the landowner that allows them ownership and operation of the wells, 2 points of access through gates, all of the easements they need, sanitary control easements, also easements for access, water lines and electrical to go from the 3 wells and then all the way down to where their existing booster stations sit off of Hunter Road. This agreement was finalized in 2018, 2019. So they don't have to pay for this water. That's the other nice thing. This water is theirs. They have a perpetual agreement for access to this source once it's developed. Next slide. This is a little bit of the information I wanted to share with you on what they've gathered so far about the water quality and productivity. There's one other Trinity well nearby that where water production values were taken before and after acidization. We're pretty certain we're gonna have to acidize these wells as part of their completion and development. The water quality is good. We know that there's gonna be higher levels of TDS, fluorine, iron, and sulfates. If you go to the next slide, you can see a much better view of what water quality we think we're gonna get out of these wells. But like I said, if we need to, we can also blend it with the Edwards. Next slide. Just to let you all know, this waiver request is limited to Region L. It does not cross into another regional planning area. The black outlined area there is the boundary of Crystal Clear's CCN, and it is entirely within Region L planning group. Next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about why this wasn't in the previous plan. Historically, historically, Crystal Clear's been very rural, and providing to a lot of agricultural, rural farmer type areas. It wasn't until we've seen this massive influx of people and population that we really needed to start looking into more regional water planning and development of larger sources. So this project was never in the plan itself, obviously. It was originally intended to be self-funded over a course of so many years, but because the need for it has increased so rapidly, the district now has to go out for funding. So we're asking if you think this is consistent with the current state water or the Region L water plan, so please grant us the waiver. Next slide. Timeline. We did the application back in December. We're expecting loan approval in maybe July of this year. I know that varies sometimes. We'll have to go through some planning. Like I said, design is done, but we're gonna have to get our design approved, by the Water Development Board before we can actually go to them. We'd like to start construction in December of this year and have it complete within 6 months. Next slide. This involvement with regional planning is kind of new to us. I say that being the district and myself. So we haven't had a whole lot of engagement prior to this meeting with any of you. I know Michelle helped me quite a bit. Had some conversations with Kai, but other than that, there hasn't been a whole lot of interaction with folks here today. I have a feeling that's gonna change soon because we've got other projects coming up as well. Next slide. In conclusion, we really need to develop this water source. Crystal Clear really needs to develop this water source. It's likely they're gonna run out of water in the next 4 to 5 years. Please remember the state or the regional water plan does state that there's plenty of Trinity water available for water management strategies in Comal County, which is where this is located. And we'd really like it if y'all would grant us a waiver.
I have a technical question and then see where the discussion goes.
Sure.
I didn't hear any description of the means to convey the reduced groundwater to blending sites or treatment sites or anything like that. Is that part of the project that you're seeking funding for?
That will be phase 2. This part now is just to develop and complete each of the wells. There will be a part 2 that involves pumps, pipes, conveyance, electrical, ground storage, and possible blending. So no, it is not part of the funding, the $2.3 million that's being requested today.
Okay, yes.
You said the landowner was TXI. Is that the owner of the well now? So they do not own the well. TXI sold to Mark Marietta. So
TXI owns the land. Martin Marietta operates the quarry on it.
So TXI retained the land.
Yes.
Ownership of the land, and Martin Marietta operates that, and Martin Marietta has since in arrangement with CRH Oldcast to buy the facility. But you're saying TXI maintained that,
The land ownership is still under TXI operations.
which is owned by Martin Marietta. Okay, just wanted.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you look up the parcel information, the owner is TXI.
Yeah, and the owner of TXI is Martin Marietta, which is sold to old CRH. But that's just curious how that. I see the TXI.
Yeah.
That's an old.
I think there's going to be a number of questions, so bear with us as we try to queue them up for you.
That's okay.
I have a follow-up question to that. You indicated that you have secured an agreement to have access to the wells. Does that agreement also secure access to the groundwater right?
No, that's gonna have to be done through the groundwater district.
Well, so the groundwater rights held and owned by someone, presumably TXI or Martin Marietta, whomever. Have they agreed? I've run into this incidentally, where a company.
Remember that Comal Trinity groundwater district is very new. So when these wells were drilled, there were no rules in place.
That may be.
Yes, and so now that's something we're gonna have to approach with them to figure out what that permit volume is gonna look like once we know more about the productivity.
I understand that. My question specifically though is, you secured the right to a surface apartments, the well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you secured the right to produce the groundwater through that well?
We can't do that until the wells are completed. This is the first step. We have to do this step first.
If you were permitting in my district, I would ask you that question before I granted before you granted the permit. So what I'm trying to get to is, I'm concerned about you asking us to express support for a consistency waiver to complete the construction of these wells so that they can be produced, so they can produce water. I haven't heard that you possess the right to produce that water, regardless of any permitting that may be coming. It sounded as though you
So
made a
on
distinction between the
on the wells, on the registration for the wells, it has an estimated volume on there based on the pumping rate that they saw when they were drilled. But we've been told that the production permit is going to be based on what happens after they're completed, depending on if they're completed in the upper or middle Trinity.
I think what Mr. Andrews is,
Speak up.
I said, I think what Mr. Andrews is asking is in your land, grant for the wells and the easements, is there a legal provision that gives you a right from TXI to the groundwater, or is there something in your groundwater registration that has that in Crystal Clear's name as opposed to TXI?
Is there something in the permit that has it in Crystal Clear's name versus TXI? The permits are in Crystal Clear's name. Does that answer the question?
There's no permits.
The wells are registered in Crystal Clear's name. Yes, sorry, thank you.
Well,
And when was your last communication with the district regarding?
I would have to get that information from the geologists that we work with on these projects.
I don't know how this is any different, if I might say, than, I think, I don't have a problem with it personally. I mean, we just approved a waiver for GBRA's project, the ASR project that is undefined, unlocated, unsourced, unknown.
I wouldn't say unsourced.
But we don't know where or how or any of the details about it, so not having specific characteristics of a few water wells to an entity, so
maybe my comments are being misunderstood. I'm not expressing opposition to their request. But they were making a request for us to express support, so I don't do that without gathering the details I think I need to.
So they're requesting support, or I guess support does their.
So the actual request is for us to express support for the consistency waiver that's been submitted to TWP. And to draw, to the extent there's a comparison here to procedure, in GBRA's case, the two existing water management strategies have gone through the planning process such as it is, and whatever that process is to determine its reliability, et cetera, and they're adding a pipeline to it. They're asking to amend it, we've yet to approve the amendment. So they're related clearly, but there is a little difference.
There's a nuance.
Yeah, I think that there's a distinction there. So what Crystal Clear is requesting is a waiver to essentially not include this project in the plan. And what GBRA is requesting to do is to amend the plan and add that facility component. So there are two different processes. One is
Can y'all, I can't hear what you're saying at the moment.
Okay, I was saying that there's a distinction. Oh, hello. Can you hear me here? Can you hear me now?
Closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was saying that there's a distinction here between what Crystal Clear is requesting and what GBRA just requested in the previous agenda item. GBRA was requesting to amend the previous plan to add a new infrastructure component. That's the minor amendment process. What Crystal Clear is requesting is a separate process, which is a waiver that is essentially requesting to not include this project in the previous plan, to still be eligible for funding.
But it has to be in a plan to be considered. So what?
No,
that's what they're asking.
Okay.
Sidestep the entire planning process due to timing, I believe.
Yeah,
Right. Not saying you don't have a good reason.
Really all due to timing.
Timing and funding, that's our purpose.
So we're approving a waiver to allow them to qualify for funding for the research.
I don't know if it matters, but it's defund.
Support.
It's defund, it's not SWIFT funding.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, you're right. Okay. And so, correct me if I'm, well, I understand the mag that I use and how, it looks as though there's available water for permitting. We were part of the planning process, it became, and had been part of the regional planning group. All the additional work, including cumulative effects and all that process that we complete, those traps would have been run. Going this route, if it's approved by TWDB, ultimately we void all that. Okay. Given that, will TWDB's process include an analysis of the request that will be, I guess, in part similar to the list that GBRA is going to be scrutinized by? Does it change the plan in any significant way, et cetera, Is that what will ultimately happen at TWDB?
Yes. Yes, that is all part of the TWDB process as the application is being processed. It initially, when the applications come in, they go through planning reviews to assess, are the population numbers relatively accurate based on what numbers we have already for the planning groups. Do they have water use surveys to document what their actual water use has been for the previous 3 years? Is it a project that is either specified in the regional water plan, the state water plan, with costs, which is where GBRA got caught because it's in the plan, but they had 1 mile of pipeline where they need 85, significant cost difference. So, if a consistency waiver is submitted, it will get reviewed with regards to, is this consistent with water supply that is available? Is it going to be consistent with, project funding for similar projects? Will this interfere with other regional projects that are already in the plan?
So what are
And environmental reviews as well as engineering reviews.
So we're not approving a consistency waiver, we're expressing support, regional support for Crystal Clear's application of a consistency waiver.
That's correct.
Simple as that.
Furthermore, TWDB won't evaluate the waiver unless we do express it.
Unless we do express support. Okay, I think it's crystal clear.
Jonathan, you have.
I like that.
Diane, do you have a question or comment?
I have 3 points I want to make. One is that this project will be in the new plan, or they will be supplying all the information they need to put the rest of the project in the new plan. And I think our new plan is gonna be ready to get SWIFT funding for its projects within 3 or 4 years, something like that. Whenever it comes out, I don't know if it's immediate, but it's gonna, let's just say 3 or 4 years before they could apply. Meanwhile, they need the water, according to their projections, in 4 years. So this is a step that will be followed up with other steps that will help them reach that goal to serve that area, which I can tell you because I live around there, that the growth east of I-35 in that area is like mushroom farms. I mean, it is, the River Foundation is monitoring 12 wastewater permits right now. So, timing is everything in this. And, regarding that location and the Trinity there, many years ago, I followed closely and tried to intervene and ended up not intervening on purpose on the water ski lake that uses Trinity Wells right there on I-35 between San Marcos and New Braunfels. And that's when I learned about the kind of water that was available from the Trinity there. And so I have one question for Carissa, and that is, do you know what direction the groundwater flow is? Is there a direction to it, or is it a pocket of water that doesn't necessarily move from one area to another? I know this area is not connected very well with the Trinity Aquifer and Dripping Springs and Wimberley, because those are kind of separate and there's a lot of faults in between. But what do you know about the Trinity in that area?
I honestly cannot answer those questions. I do know that Hayes and Comel are separate, but I couldn't tell you about the actual direction of flow of the groundwater.
Well, there
and
may
the
not.
location of our wells, but I'm sure that, that like again, the geologists that we work with on this project can answer those questions.
There may not be a direction there, but I just wondered if there was any information about that. To me, this waiver is something that we can do, and then we can assess the full project in our plan that we're working on right now.
Thank you. One more question for TWDB. If the planning group does not express support for the waiver request that's submitted, is there an alternative process for the study?
They can come in for a minor amendment determination is one option, or they can pursue other funding options.
May I speak real quick to that?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm the general manager, Virginia Frankie at Crystal Clear. And the biggest reason for us is, as the Water Development Board funding is the interest rate, the savings to our ratepayers, we're having to pay that back. We have the option of doing private market funding, but the interest rate is larger. And that's the reason we really want to pursue the Water Development Board funds. So that is the biggest thing. That's the timing of it. So, I appreciate it.
Okay, is there any, Mr. Taylor?
I have a couple of questions in relation to this, and maybe a comment or two. I think the distinction between the consistency waiver request and the major minor amendment process, is a significant one. There are safeguards built into the process and the planning process in relation to, assessing effects of projects and how they relate to other projects and groundwater management areas and everything else. And I mean, to date, as I understand it, I think we've granted one consistency request historically in 2018, I understood, with Elmendorf. But other than that, it's been major and minor amendments, and those normally, there's a great deal of information and study on those simply because of the nature of the process. To the extent that, in terms of if I had a preference in terms of how these things would come to the group, I would, I think, always prefer to see the amendment process embraced versus requests to be completely outside the plan. And I mean, while it may be fine in an instant case, we're not entirely sure what future requests we might have and what kinds of items. So I mean, that in itself, I think, is something that the group probably needs to at least consider. In relation to this project, and I, being in a municipal seat here, I'm not normally in the business of ever wanting to prevent someone from getting the water supply needed for their customers. I do note though that, I mean, this has been a pretty long time in terms of development. That these wells were drilled in 12, but there was also work done in 2015 and 2019 in furtherance of bringing those wells online. What was the original thinking in terms of when they would be needed? In other words, we've had several planning cycles actually since 2012. I don't think this has occurred in any of them.
I do know that some of the delay was finalizing the agreement between the landowner and the district. So there were a few years there where there were discussions about making sure the district had everything they needed as far as access and easements on the property. But that's what kind of took place between 2018 and 19.
All right. I'm sorry.
I'm
No, I'm
sorry, would you like me to go up here when you don't hear me? Fine.
Actually, would you mind going to the podium, or perhaps some of our virtual attendees want to hear them?
As Versa said, there was litigation at the time, early on. I came in at 2016, I think we finally settled that litigation somewhere 2018, I believe it was October 2018. At the time, we thought we were going to self-fund these wells, as she said, because we thought we could phase them in. It would be something we would do one, we get some development in, pay ourselves back, and continue to move forward. Because the growth rate is so rapid and the need is there, these need to be developed sooner rather than later. And that's what has pushed our timeline up, Mr. Taggart. And so, you know the development that's in that area.
Yeah.
And so that is the main reason that we are coming in. We're wanting to go through Water Development Board, like I said, because the interest rate is cheaper, and it saves our ratepayers some money there. But we are probably going to need to develop these a little more close together in timing. And so that is, there's some history I don't have, and I apologize for that. But my understanding from all the different discussions that I had with previous management when they were there was it was intended to be self-funded. And so it didn't have to be in the state water plan because we weren't pursuing Water Development Board money.
Although it being in the state water plan would also be necessary in relation to considering permits.
Not necessarily.
Not as a hard rule, but as a consideration.
We prefer that we get it in there. I mean, it makes our life a little bit easier. It's just we've not, again, we typically have been more rural and served farmers, and we're in an area that's becoming suburban, urban, you know.
Yeah, one question in relation to supply, if we go back to your supply slides, I guess one thing I wanted to ask about, I didn't see a supply delivery in relation to the completion of the first phase of the ARWA project, which I think crystal clear is under CRWA, one of the participants in. I didn't see that supply coming online was reflected in the information provided here. If we could go to that slide on supplies.
The slide is about population growth and the district's existing
Water
source.
supplies,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
So I think it's before that.
So where is the ARWA delivery shown here?
Those are just their existing sources.
So an ARWA is expected to start deliveries by the end of this year?
Potentially, it was supposed to be June of 23, but the end of Q1, early Q2, if things stay on target, but it's only a portion of phase 1.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and what volume, I mean, would that add to this?
It's 1,080
I think.
acre feet for that phase 1B.
But that's coming in on the opposite side of the district also. So that's something to consider. The groundwater is all in the northwest corner, and the RWA stuff is all coming down in the southeast.
Right, I recognize, although there are sources shown here that are obviously at the other end of the system also with supplies, like Lake Dunlap. So this is a partial picture then of supply going forward.
I mean, yes, we know ARP is coming in within the year. I don't think 1,000 acre feet is going to get them very far at this point.
Are the wells in your CCN?
No, sir, they're just outside of the CCN boundary.
Do they need to be in the CCN?
No, they do not.
Okay.
Okay, any additional, I'm sorry.
Yes. Carissa, is it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So it seems like you all had a very rapid change in customers, right? Farmers and then all of a sudden development. Were you able to kind of pace yourself on that, or you just started writing agreements thinking you'd get this water going? I mean, did you have any control over this rapid growth and change in customer or not?
We don't have any authority to say no without letting go of a portion of our CCN. We're obligated by law to provide. So, you know, what we can regulate is those non-standard service agreements as people come in. But we've got loans to pay back and things like that, so we want to continue to do that. So we've got to continue to develop those water sources. We're not hurting for water today, but we will be if we don't do something. And we're obligated to try to stay ahead of that curve, and this is our effort to do that.
And so what would happen if you were not able to get this funded by the Water Development Board? You said you pay higher interest rates, but, I mean, what are the other consequences?
That would be the biggest thing, because we would still go out for funding for it. It would just be a different funding source.
What's the difference in the interest rate? What are we talking about?
I'm not real sure. Honestly, I haven't looked at it in the last probably few weeks, but it's usually about a point. A percent to 1.5%. It can make a big difference on an $8 million loan or a $15 million loan.
And you said you'd be passing this on to ratepayers, savings, or the expense would be passed on to ratepayers?
Correct. It would be part of debt service, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any additional comments or questions regarding the matter?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely. Speak.
How do we go about getting phase 2 of the Trinity Well project in the water plan?
Well, we'll ultimately.
Another agenda item, maybe?
Well,
Maybe next time.
We'll go through that process to determine what that is. It'll involve coordination with technical consultants and coordination with CAI through San Antonio River Authority, and we'll figure out what the appropriate process is. If it requires any specific action by the planning group, we'll get that for the board at the main meeting if possible. So we'll coordinate with you on
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Let me ask the group, is there a motion to authorize the San Antonio River Authority to submit a letter to TWDB expressing support for the consistency waiver for TWDB Project 21-825 Crystal Clear SUD 2024 Capital Improvement Project?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Is there any opposition to the motion? If there is, speak up. Okay. There being none, we'll show the motion passed by consensus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
As just a question from the management of the groundwater district. Have y'all participated in the process where, you know, the Regional Planning Group reaches out to the different the supply side, and participated in the process of filling out the information that they requested and request every planning cycle?
We've done it this last year. I don't know about.
I don't know about previous. I just took over 2 years ago to the end of the
Well, this is, to me, it's kind of a great example of, if you don't participate in the process until you need the money, you're already a little bit late.
Sure.
And so, we encourage you to continue and speak to your peers, other groups, to help the regional planning group get the numbers they need so we have an accurate regional plan. Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to agenda item 15, schedule potential agenda items for the next meeting. The next meeting, I believe, is scheduled for Thursday, May 2nd, 9 a.m. Presumably here. We will make sure we have agenda items for deal with the executive committee membership, and a discussion regarding revisions to availability values used within the plan. Are there any other items that members would like to suggest be placed on the agenda at this time? And if not, know that you can contact Kai or myself and let us know if you have something you'd like to add to the agenda. And we'll see what we can do to accommodate that request. Any discussion regarding that? There being none, we'll move to agenda item 16, public comment. Is there anyone present, virtually or in person, that would like to make public comment at this time? Okay, there being none, move to agenda item 17, motion to adjourn. Second, opposition, adjourn, thank you.
Yeah, real quick.